very good morning, Africa, and thank you for tuning in for Media Monitor with me, Alisha Jali. Remember, you can share your views on our topics through Twitter, and our handle is @SA Media Monitor. But first, let's have a look at the leading stories across all media platforms at this hour. Health Minister Aaron Motsoaledi has criticized the management of Letaba Hospital outside Tzaneen in Limpopo. This after the death of 2 patients. The hospital's generator failed to kick in during a power failure. Motsoaledi says the incident is more disturbing because hospitals countrywide have been given instructions on backup facilities. President Jacob Zuma says universal free education is the aim of the South African government and should not have a price tag. The president was speaking in Durban at the Inkosi Albert Luthuli International Convention Center. He said government does not believe education should be sold as a commodity and only available to a minority. He says the challenge for government is to create more space at tertiary institutions or build more tertiary institutions so that all could be educated. He also met several university graduates who had benefited from the Jacob G. Zuma Foundation. In your sports news, Bafana have started the African Nations Championship qualifiers on a high, beating Mauritius 3-0 in Soweto. The second leg will be played in Mauritius in 2 weeks' time. Well, our radio bulletins are currently leading with the following stories this morning. The ANC's National Executive Committee has asked government to help restore the credibility of the International Criminal Court. The airport's company has tightened security at OR Tambo Airport following the discovery of 2 stowaways on a British Airways flight bound for London. Eskom is battling with major electricity shortages over this weekend. And as South Africa celebrates Father's Day, recent research has found that there is a noticeable increase in hands-on fathers in the country. Well, Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir hogs the headlines again this morning with reports stating how he snuck out of the country. Let's have a look at how the social media reactions are this morning. Caroline Southley says the laws of the South African government chose to ignore when it let al-Bashir leave. Dumisani Lubisi says amid confusing sequence of events, government sent out SMSs to wait to arrest al-Bashir while others sneaked him out. Now giving us an input and analysis of today's stories and those that kept us talking throughout the week. We now welcome Mr. Mathatha Tsedu. He's the Director of SANEF as well as a veteran journalist. Mr. Tsedu has worked for various newspapers as an editor, including the Sunday Times, the City Press, as well as the Sunday Independent, basically everything we're reviewing today. And also joining us is Mr. Levi Kabwato. Levi is a former media specialist at the Media Institute of Southern Africa-MISA. He has worked previously as a features writer and editor for various publications. Gentlemen, a very great pleasure to have you with me in studio this morning. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Alicia.
All right, gentlemen, let's have a look at today's newspaper headlines. The City Press is leading with a story about Bashir's great escape from South Africa. The Sunday Times is also leading with a story about Bashir's AU summit debacle, but pulling into the 4 questions about the South African security officials and who gave them an order to not arrest Bashir. The Sunday Independent, well, it seems as if COSATU is not willing to grant Zwelinzima Vavi and NUMSA a second chance. And the Tribune there, de Klerk Foundation strongly condemns the Charleston shootings. And the Weekend Argus is leading with a story about Operation Fiela, where about 81 undocumented foreigners were detained in Cape Town yesterday. Going continental, Nigeria's Daily Trust, President Buhari's Transition Committee report claims that Goodluck Jonathan's government left behind a deficit of 7 trillion naira. All right, in the newspaper headlines that we are discussing today, gentlemen, we're going to start with the Sunday Times today, and it's all about Bashir and his great escape. The Sunday Times headline there, the truth behind Bashir's escape. A tale of how the Sudanese president was allegedly guaranteed safety 5 days before he actually came to the AU summit, and Mugabe apparently summoned President Zuma and Nkosazana Zuma to get assurance that all AU delegates be granted immunity. And of course, we're going to look at the City Press. It also says there how Bashir snuck out of South Africa. Now, this is another look of how Bashir was whizzed out to his hidden jet at the Waterkloof Air Force Base. And this piece insinuates that the government security officials were sent an SMS with instructions to arrest him. But now the question is, who gave the instruction not to arrest him? Please answer the question there. Let's start with you, Mr. Tsedu.
Well, the issue of President al-Bashir is it's two-faced. There's the legal aspect, which is really whether the South African government had any right not to honor the court order. And then there is the political aspect, which is whether it actually had politically would have been able to arrest him. And on the first one, there is no doubt that once the court of this country gives an order, everybody, including government, must abide. And technically they should have, but in practical political terms, that would have been worse than the storm they are faced with right now, of being seen as a government that gave its word to the AU and to the Sudanese, and then allowed him in here, almost like luring him in here so that they can then arrest him and hand him over to some Europeans. That doesn't sell in this continent. You don't do that. So the best way would have been out of this would have been if al-Bashir, of his own accord, had decided that he was not coming, had sent either his deputy, or in many instances you find that when the AU is sitting, the president does not go, nobody, not even the foreign minister goes, but the ambassador who is based in, if it is in a particular country and not in Addis, the ambassador there would then represent the country. If al-Bashir had chosen that, it would have been good. He didn't choose that, and now we sit with this.
Levi, you know, the issue here also was a lot of people compared this to when Mugabe wasn't allowed to travel to AU meetings because of the sanctions. What do you think about this story?
Yeah, I mean, the AU is a very political institution, and I really agree with Mathatha here that there was no other way for the South African government to handle this. But I think it sends clear warnings about compliance with court orders, with what the judiciary in the country says, and the need to adhere to that. But in terms, if you're looking at this from a very African perspective, then there really is no other way or to approach the matter. If you recall, a few years back, Malawi had to cancel the hosting of the summit altogether because of that same al-Bashir issue, as it were. So for future summits, I think it would be quite important for the Sudanese to also be sensitive to this issue and try as much as possible to accommodate other views that might be quite strong.
Thank you so much, Levi. A lot of people were actually saying that this could be undermining the authority of the AU, which did grant everybody indemnity. But let's move on now and look at what the Sunday Independent is leading with. It says the ANC slams the door on Vavi and Nomsa. Ooh, the Independent alleges that President Jacob Zuma's hopes of rescuing the embattled Nomsa and trying to bring back Vavi to COSATU could be in jeopardy, as it appears the ruling party might have shut the door of these prospects. Well, we've seen the new NUMGS with his policies. What does this mean for the ruling party going into local government elections, Mr. Tsedu?
I don't think that President Zuma necessarily wants Vavi and Nomsa back. But that doesn't mean that there are no people within the ANC who want that to happen. The efforts by Cyril Ramaphosa to bring some kind of rapprochement between NUMSA and COSATU, and the utterances of the Secretary General Gwede Mantashe are all moving in the direction, up to at least today, they were all moving in the direction where they were saying it is wrong to expel people. Now, but I don't think that President Zuma necessarily is part of that kind of thinking. The situation has deteriorated enough for everybody to actually accept that NUMSA and VAVI are out of COSATU, and they are on their own trajectory where they want to form their own party. The Alliance Summit, as Gwede correctly points out, it's not a summit of individuals. It's a summit of structures.
All right, let's leave it there, Mr. Tsedu. I want us to talk about another front page now from the week in August, and it says here, foreigners held in City Fiela Soup. 81 undocumented foreign nationals were arrested in Cape Town yesterday under Operation Fiela. Counterfeit goods with the value of about 150,000 rand were confiscated, as well as dagga that was also seized. Levi, your views?
Another contentious issue as well. How do you balance the rights of immigrants, and also how do you pursue visible policing, as it were in this case, in the country? I think, broadly speaking, the South African government has a very particular duty to try and see how it can try to legalize the stay of foreigners in the country, or at least try to deal in one hand with the aspect of migration, which is a practical necessity for many people living on the continent. And I think also it puts President Zuma once again on the spotlight to then say, you know, there are push factors that are pushing these people out of their countries to come and pursue a better life in South Africa. And given the strength and authority of the South African government, at least within the Southern African region, then I think it also puts that burden on the South African government to insist on particular approaches to other African governments to say, look, deal with your issues in your own countries, whether it's democracy, whether it's governance, whether it's the economy. Can you decisively deal with that so that we stop this massive migration that's occurring within the region?
Mr. Tsedu, very quickly.
The South African government has a responsibility to keep law and order. And now and then we see, even if it is not being called Operation Fiela, in Bree Street here in Johannesburg, police and traffic officers go in and confiscate counterfeit goods from locals. So when they do it against people who are not locals, it is not necessarily because they are not locals.
Absolutely, that's the point that I wanted to put across there. They're actually fighting the crime and not the nationalities. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we look at this day in history. Do stay tuned. Welcome back as we continue with our discussion. If you've just joined us, our guest this morning, Mr. Mathatha Tsedu, the Director of SANEF and veteran journalist, as well as Mr. Levi Kabwato, an independent analyst. Now today, 23 years ago, the then ANC President Nelson Mandela threatened to end talks with the National Party due to the Boipatong massacre that saw more than 40 innocent people being killed. Let's take a look at this insert compiled by one of our producers, Maleboho Makutli.
It has become clear from the discussions, especially during Kodrasa 2, that we have reached a deadlock of such a nature that there is just no way forward. And then, in addition, there are these killings. You don't expect us to fold our arms.
In the dead of the night, men affiliated with the IFP came into the homes of residents of Joe Slovo informal settlement, killing more than 40 of them. The ANC blamed President F.W. de Klerk for not doing enough to stop the violence and decided to withdraw from the negotiation table that will lead to a democratic South Africa.
The entire negotiation process is in tatters, and many groups which are meeting will, of course, after the meeting of the National Executive, be given instructions.
So will they still go to the meeting tomorrow?
Well, until the meeting of the National Executive takes place, the position is as it has been going on. And a change of attitude will come as a result of the decision of the National Executive Committee.
The National Party President, F.W. de Klerk, had declared in Tokyo that his government had a plan to counter mass action by mobilizing the army and the police at the Boipatong settlement right after the massacre occurred.
If he's thinking, for example, in terms of a state of emergency, then he has got a fight in his hands, because there will be a defiance campaign in this country of unprecedented dimensions. I will lead that campaign. We can never again go back to the stage before the 2nd of February 1990. He just must give that up.
Blame for these brutal killings fell on the apartheid regime and its leader. But in 1993, members of the IFP were arrested and convicted for their involvement in the massacre. Their lives lost were not in vain, as South Africa held the first democratic elections less than 2 years later.
Very sad day to remember. Now, panel, this is a very important day in our history, but it seems that the media has neglected it. Your views, Papa Tsedu?
Yeah, we seem to be a nation that really forgets a lot about black pain particularly. White people are able to keep their pain alive and well, but we seem to be quite willing to forget. This was a particularly bad day. I was on the scene, I was working, and we were moving from one house to another, bodies all over, and it took almost the whole day to clear the bodies, and by late afternoon, some of the bodies were beginning to be bloated, and some of the people were calling on us to try and make sure that their bodies are taken away, because it was really just terrible. And all because the National Party wanted to weaken the ANC, and they were using the IFP guys who were based at the Madala hostel just near Boipatong, who went out with police Caspers escorting them into the area and killed all these people. And when some of the IFP people were arrested and went to court and were tried, one of them, when the question was raised, why did you kill children? Because one of the kids was killed while on the back of their mother. And this guy said, inyoka izala inyoka. Like a snake gives birth to a snake. So if you want to get rid of all snakes, you kill even the little ones. It was very, very bad. But the fact that the media today is not full of this matter, it's also an indictment on us, particularly as black journalists, that we are colluding in the erosion of memory about the pain that brought us where we are today.
Very quickly, Levi.
I have nothing to add on
I
this.
don't
Yeah,
even
this
think
is-
we both have anything to add on that. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Papa Tsedu, for taking us back to those many years ago when such a harrowing incident happened. Let's now have a look at the newspapers. As you page through your newspapers, you'll find that the very interesting story on page 5 of the City Press. Now, it says here, sleeping rough and very rich. Well, this was a sleepover on the streets compiled by Radio 702 to try and raise money for an NGO. CEOs spent the night like the homeless. But now this article, very interestingly, wants to know why the CEOs had a one-night stand with poverty. Instead of starting debates about job creation, they managed to raise 25 million rand though that night. Levi?
Oh yeah, I think this is another very divisive issue. In one breath, you obviously accept that the cause was worth it, and one hopes that the 25 million would really go a long way in easing the pain of the intended beneficiaries. Then in another breath, of course, you're looking at how sustainable this initiative is, and how does it really speak to the pain of the suffering, as it were. So if you're a person who is homeless and you spend every day and every night on the streets, this would come across to you as an insult, almost, to say, you really don't have that appreciation, or you cannot really speak about this pain by virtue of having slept one night on the streets of Joburg. So I think there's need for that conversation to continue, and really see how then these people, the CEOs who are quite moneyed, begin to sort of contribute quite progressively towards the reduction of this huge gap that exists in South Africa between the rich and the poor.
Papa Tsedu, they actually mentioned in the article how the CEOs had hot water bottles and had blankets and everything. And then they asked this question, but shouldn't you be starting debates on job creation? What do you think?
Well, there are two ways of looking at this. The one is to say, here are all these rich people who are doing a Tokyo. You remember Tokyo when he decided he was going to spend one night in a shack in Deep Sloot, and then came out the following morning saying, it's very bad, people shouldn't be living here, and then he went back to Horton. Yeah. So there's a sense in which you can look at it that way. But you can also look at it as a fundraising gimmick. And in that instance, they raised 25 million rands. And as Levi says, go and ask the people who are going to benefit from the 25 million rand whether it was not worth it, this gimmick of sleeping out. As long as they were able to raise that 25 million and it will help some people, it's cool.
Let's leave it there, Papa Tsedu. It's cool they did raise that money. Let's commend them for that at least. Well, let's have a look now at the Sunday Independence, page 3. Pop goes magic in Charlize's romance. While Charlize and Sean Penn, the end of a love story, and a look at how Penn is quite the enigma that people love to hate. Now, panel, it seems we don't have a famous son-in-law any longer. Levi, what do you say to this? A-lister.
I'll leave this one to Levi. He's the romantic.
Levi, your views, please.
I think, one of those stories which when you read, go through the Sunday papers, you kind of just look at it and,
smile.
you smile. And then you also, begin to see the aspirations of the people and really say, we're really looking forward to this moment. And all of a sudden, it looks like nothing there is going to happen. But you never know. Something else. This is Hollywood, as it were, and we've come to expect these things to happen. So in the long run, maybe another headline will pop from Charlize herself in the near future. I can tell you that.
Papa Tsedu, please say something.
No, I'm not really sure. I mean, it's.
Is it important to South Africans?
Yeah, it is. And for Sunday papers, it's particularly important because these kind of papers the front pages are very serious. Now you need something to break the monotony, and Charlize in this instance is providing that break from serious to something that says, oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay, let's leave it there now and move on to the very same paper there, the Sunday Independent, but on page 7 now, it says the headline there, Stowaway expose laxity at the OR Tambo International Airport. Well, the death of a stowaway this week has now raised serious questions about the South African aviation standards and adherence thereto. Levi?
Yeah, of course, I think those are the questions that most media would ask, but I think they raise unintended alarm. For me, the bigger story is about, the person who then convinces themselves that, if I can do this and get to the UK, get to Europe, or get to the US in search of a better life, then this, I think, speaks volumes about the kind of desperation that's sipping right at the bottom where our people are. In terms of aviation security, of course, I think it's a major slip up and something that needs, in a post 9/11 era, something that really has to go, can't go unchallenged, as it were. So I think it will be looked into. These things don't happen quite often, but when they do happen, I think they prompt us to ask very serious questions about the level of desperation that's within some of our people.
But the funny thing is they didn't even mention the migrant issue here, Papa Tsedu. It's just they said this is one incident in over 10 years.
Yeah, and if you realize that when the plane gets to 35,000 feet and the pilot says we are now cruising, the temperature is minus 50 degrees. Inside they control it, but in the hull where the wheels are, where the guys were, it is not controlled. So for someone to decide that they are going that way, it's, as Levi says, the ultimate in desperation. But there are security issues that ACSA has to deal with.
Well, let's see what comes up in this week after the investigations. Well, after the break, we're going to discuss the Cura School's children's segregation video that went viral on social media. Please stay right there.
SABC News seeks to be the biggest, the most extensive and diverse news organization on the continent. Our mission is to provide accurate and credible news and current affairs programming throughout the day. We are committed to covering every part of the continent. We reflect the world to Africa and Africa to the world. SABC News, Africa's news leader. Now available throughout the continent.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. We're now discussing the prominent stories of the week. Bullying and segregation in schools took center stage in the news this week. In one incident, a video went viral showing alleged racial segregation at the Cura private school in Rudderplaat. A similar racial incident just months ago at the same group of private schools led to an investigation by the Gauteng Provincial Minister of Education. In the video, school children here are seen going on a field trip, grouped and transported according to their race. The school defended itself, saying the children were separated legitimately and voluntarily according to language preference and not race. Now, earlier this week, school bullying was captured on video where a learner was assaulting another in class at a school in Vereniging. Panel, let's start with the racial incident at the Cura private school. Is there something wrong with this school or their policy? What's happening here? What do you think is the problem? Let's start with you, Levi.
Well, I think we now know what the problem is, given what happened and the subsequent investigations that were carried out, and the MEC for Education in Gauteng actually coming out and saying, well, you know, there is a problem here. Can you begin to deal with these things? So that's one. But it doesn't really appear as if there's any particular will to try and resolve this matter in a manner that, you know, sends a very clear signal, one on the part of the Ministry of Education much more broadly within the country, and also on the part of schools such as this one, in this instance, that, well, you know, what are you really doing about, you know, the national aspiration that is the Rainbow Nation, because they do have a role to play within that, and right now it doesn't seem to be happening, and I think there are big problems looming on the edge.
Papa said we're waiting for the MEC Panyaza Lesufi to deliver a verdict if they're found guilty of racism. What do you think is going to come out?
The reality is that this school or this range of schools under this banner have had a racist problem all along. And for me, personally, the question is, why do black parents keep on taking their children to an overtly racist institution? And the reason is both Panyaza and national government at education level have failed black children. The schools in the townships are dysfunctional in reality. And so parents are scrambling around trying to find a place where their children can get some level of education that can help them escape the poverty trap. And if it means that they are going now to have to be taught by racists, they'll close their eyes and say, I want you to be something tomorrow. And that's the tragedy of this, that we are faced with a situation where people are forced, essentially, to send children to racist institutions because government is failing to bring quality education to black areas.
Let's now talk about the bullying incident. Should we treat these incidents as isolated and not portraying the national picture here, Levi?
Not really isolated. They're just occurring in an age of social media where it's now quite easy to, you know, just take a video or take pictures and distribute them. But it's something that has obviously gone on for a very long time, and it happens in most schools. I think we have to do a lot more in raising a particular consciousness around you know, being human, humanity, Ubuntu, as it were. So that's something as well that should be the responsibility of the national government, you know, on education, that have strong biases, you know, and get people to treat each other as people. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And Papa Tsedu, I think if the headlines earlier on, the president did mention that government is working towards an era where education could be for free and provided to everybody, if that means building more institutions so that everybody has access. So hopefully government is trying to address that issue. In our next story now, youth unemployment remains one of the major challenges facing South Africa. Lack of skills, unaffordable education fees and inaccessibility of funding are seen as the main obstacles for those who aspire to start their businesses to create employment opportunities. However, critics argue that the youth of today is interested in having a nice time despite the opportunities available today compared to the 1990s generation. Panel? Very interesting indeed. The youth of today are seen to be taking a back seat in the fight against poverty and unemployment, and we see them occupying prison cells for various reasons. Papa said, why?
Well, youth, to come with a generalization of that level would be wrong. There are some people amongst the young people who have no interest in doing anything serious, and they just want to do their minwana pezulu and move from one bash to another. Yeah, kuze. You seem to know them better than me.
I'm a young person, Papa.
Yeah, but there are also serious young people who are doing wonderful things, who are skilling themselves and innovating and producing things that are taking this country forward. To come with a sweeping generalization like that is wrong.
Let's not generalize. Levi?
Absolutely, I agree. But I think, when you begin to connect, I was paying attention to the June 16 tweets and other Facebook comments, as it were. So if we make those connections, I think it becomes quite apparent that there was, to quote Frantz Fanon, every generation has got its own mandate, so you either fulfill it or you betray it. So I think it's really up to the youths to decide, what are our current struggles, what are our current victories, how do we go about celebrating them, how do we go about fighting our current struggles, as it were, and begin to imagine a future in which they also want to be proud of and to be proudly associated with, as much as we now do with the youth of 1976.
Papa Tsedu, do you think that the now youth, the youth of today, is doing anything on their own without relying heavily on the government to try and create their own opportunities?
No, there are those who are doing their own things, but the NYDA has been created as a structure that is particularly directed at helping young people to do their own thing, do business, not only business with government.
Many are saying this is just a talk shop, Papa Tsedu.
No, but if you look at the reports, annual reports of the NYDA, you will see that they've done a lot of things, even around the question of skilling. For example, 86,000 people, I think, attended courses that the NYDA has done. They have funded a number of young people who are now doing quite well. So it's not all doom and gloom.
People should really go out there and see the actual results of the performances there. All right, well, Advocate Sean Kevin Abrahams takes the helm of the troubled NPA. His appointment follows the resignation of Advocate Mxolisi Nxasana, who apparently walked away with a reported 17 million rand. Panel, do you think he'll survive as the man with the poison chalice? Papa Tsedu, let's start with you.
Firstly, maybe we should congratulate and commiserate with the brother on this huge appointment. Yes. The institution is essentially in shambles, public opinion-wise. There's just been too much traffic of people coming in and too many senior people who are now in court, not prosecuting but being prosecuted. So he has a huge responsibility of building trust or rebuilding trust that the public must have in the NPA. That's the first one. And of course, all his other predecessors have run into problems when it comes to one particular issue about whether the man from Nkandla or Nkandla should go back into the dock or not. And it is going to be his biggest challenge about how he deals with that, and that will determine how long he stays in that office. And
we've seen how he's actually been quite welcomed into this position. We haven't seen much negativity around his appointment, Levi, which is quite a shocker.
It is. There isn't. So I think that also is the first step to rebuilding that trust that Mathatha spoke about. In the long run, really, you really want to see this institution exercising its independence, because it really speaks to the heart of democracy in this country.
All right. Well, South Africa will be the first country to receive the Cuban 5 this weekend after their release from a U.S. prison in December 2014. A move the International Relations said is to celebrate Clause 10 of the Freedom Charter. Now, the Cuban 5 gained international fame and recognition when they were arrested by the U.S. and sentenced to 4 life sentences and 75 years years collectively. They were falsely accused of committing espionage and conspiracy against the U.S. government. Papa Tsedu, how significant is the visit to South Africa by the Cuban Five? You know a lot about this.
Well, it's significant in terms of our relations with Cuba as a country that has been very much in the forefront of the struggles of Africa, not just South Africa, but
Tell us
Africa.
about those, Papa Tsedu.
Yeah, the Cubans, many Cubans died in Angola defending the MPLA against an onslaught by the US-backed UNITA. And those Cubans, whilst they were in Angola, were even training the ANC and SWAPO to fight the South Africans. When you hear people talk about Quito Conavale and the fights that went on at the border of Angola and Namibia, though the Cubans were right in there. And as we sit here, there are many hospitals in our country where people are being assisted by Cuban doctors to start with, and then others who are being assisted by Cuban-trained doctors. And all the training that South Africans get in Cuba, it's for free. So Cuba is an important place. There are many South Africans who were part of the call for the release of these 5 Cubans who were imprisoned in the U.S. And with the thawing of relations between the U.S. and Cuba, the 5 have been released, and their first trip is to our country. That's big.
Papa Tsedu, you are such a wealth of information and knowledge. Thank you so much for that. Well, in our next story, once again, botched circumcision stories hog the news headlines. Every year, boys become victims of botched circumcision during the rite of passage ceremonies. Every year this time, we read about botched operations. What do you think it will take to make a difference this year, Levi?
Yeah, I mean, I have some problems calling the botched circumcisions just because of the cultural element to it. I think there are competing discourses between, the mainstream safer male circumcision drives that are happening, and now you have this juxtaposed, against these very cultural initiation ceremonies, as it were. So I think how the media covers this is a bit biased, to then say, if it's done in this very cultural setting, then, the likelihood of things going wrong, people being forced to do this when they don't want to, is very high. So I think that's problem number one for me in terms of how we are presented with this story in the media. So I mean, and I'm not saying things do not go wrong there. They do quite often. But I think there's need to then begin to show and appreciate the fact that there is a very specific cultural element to this. And there are also other discourses on circumcision, male circumcision especially, that are ongoing. And there could be that kind of conflict that's playing itself out in the media without necessarily being punted as so.
Papa Tsedu.
Well, I must confess that I went through this initiation process in my
youth years,
and I spent 3 months in the mountains and came out of there a different person altogether, because those institutions at that time were seen as part of the educational process of making you a person who's valuable to your community, who's able to make developmental inputs to your community. Right now, because that aspect of education within the initiation process has been removed, it's now just a nip and cut, and it's 2 weeks. You're supposed to be back home, so it's no longer really the initiation process. It's now just getting rid of some part of your body, and whether that is being done properly.
Let's leave it there, Papa Tsedu. Well, now let's take a look, of course, at what's making news in our neighboring countries and abroad. Nigeria and its neighboring states, Chad, Cameroon, Niger and Benin, took a strong stance to set up a regional fighting force to counter militant group Boko Haram. The United States is to inject $5 million to boost the international force fighting Boko Haram in Nigeria. Britain is also throwing its weight behind the efforts of fighting the militants. Media Monitor producer Livin Mtare compiled this report.
In a renewed effort to combat the insurgents, Nigerian President Buhari announced that they have moved the anti-Boko Haram military unit headquarters to Maiduguri in the north, where most of the attacks are perpetrated.
Sojojin Najeriya sun yi rawar gani.
I renew my commitment to chase Boko Haram up to its last trenches, to obliterate it. 5 years of the evil presence of this sect is enough. Nigerian soldiers have suffered a lot of defeats, but it's not the moment to criticize. We are going to mobilize our best to attack this sect. With neighboring countries, we are going to sit down to refine a common strategy.
At the same time, Buhari has vowed to investigate senior military officials after Amnesty International released a report accusing them of horrific war crimes. The report accused the military for contributing in failing to prevent deaths of more than 8,000 people. Meanwhile, in a security clampdown following deadly attacks in Jamena on Wednesday, Chad announced it was banning the burqa and all types of clothing that leaves only eyes visible.
President Obama has once again come out to highlight the need to review the gun restriction in the United States. This after a shooting that claimed the lives of 9 people at a historic black church in Charleston, United States. The suspect, identified as 21-year-old Dylan Roof, is said to have received the .45 caliber handgun from his father as a birthday gift back in April. On his social media page, the suspect is pictured wearing a jacket with the All South African flag and the Rhodesian flag, both flags representing white supremacy. The suspect has been charged with 9 counts of murder and bail was set at $1 million. All right, we'll be back with a wrap of the show. Please stay with us.
Welcome to Network, a technology news program that also discusses what's trending in social media in and around Africa. MTN has launched its new movie and television streaming service, Front Row. If it's trending, we will find it. That's Network with me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. only on the SABC News Channel.
Welcome back to Media Monitor, our final segment. Now, panel, what stories do you think will be dominating the media this coming week? Let's start with you, Levi. Is it Parliament, ESCOM, or FIFA, or al-Bashir?
I think more al-Bashir, and I think there will be more coming out from the NPA. It would be nice to really get more biographical data of the new boss, as it were. Right now we just know that, okay, he spent 17 years, he's a very good guy, has presided over high-profile cases, but it would be quite interesting as well to know. Already I think the DA is making claims that there are people he's very close to and that might actually, say, influence what kind of decisions he takes going forward. So I think that's one big story for the week.
Papa Tsedu.
I think given that government has to go back to court with affidavits about what happened with al-Bashir, and they have to go to Parliament and speak about that, that is going to still dominate. Parliament also with the Red Overall and Hard Hat Brigade. We don't know what will be happening this week. There might be more fun, if you will, and more travel for Madam Speaker. Yeah, but those are the two areas where a lot of attention will be focused. But the ongoing problems that Brian Malife has with keeping the lights on in every place all the time is also going to be with us.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. But before we go, let's have a quick look at some of the tweets that our viewers at home have sent us. Marriage counsellor says, I concur with Mr. Tsedu. Indeed, education department is failing black pupils in township areas in terms of quality education. Thank you, marriage counsellor, for that one there. China Moore Elias says, pathetic. I support the investigations, and if necessary, the school must be closed. We say no to racial discrimination. What a way to end the show. Thank you so much to all our viewers for joining us today. Please always remember that your contributions and suggestions are highly valued. To get in touch with us, you can email us your suggestions, and our email address is mediamonitor@sabc.co.za. We are also available on Facebook. If you go to www.facebook.com/mediamonitor, and you can tick like next to our page. You can also find us on Twitter @SAMediaMonitor. Once again, 2 a.m. is our repeat broadcast. But if you can't wait, go to www.youtube.com/SABC News is where you'll find us on YouTube. Yes, we've got you covered in all sorts of media. For all our online updates, our website is www.sabc.co.za/news to get more info on the stories that you've also seen on our info boards today. From myself, Alicia Jali, the panel, and the Q-Tip team, happy Father's Day to both gentlemen here in studio, and to all of you dads at home. Have a blessed Sunday. Goodbye.
It is important for everyone to know food safety practices and make sure that their food is prepared safely from farm to the plate.
Who ensures that there's compliance?
In terms of all the abattoirs, they have to be registered. So when they are being registered, they are actually audited fully to make sure that the structural requirements as well as the hygiene requirements are met.
Most bacteria and viruses cannot withstand the normal cooking temperatures that we use to cook our food.
The bigger retailers cannot be seen as being insensitive to the food safety requirements.
There are many consumers that actually go shopping with a cooler box and ice packs so that they don't break the cold chain, because a few hours outside the temperature that it should be already shortens the shelf life of that product.
Join me on Health Talk every Saturday morning between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. as we unpack current health stories.
A concept by Steve Dyer called Color Me Human. It celebrates humanity.
Go back to a point in time when we really were hoping that Africa would be the continent of liberation and freedom. Has it become that? Do we really experience that? And if not, what are we doing to get further on that, to find the answers to that question?
The festival held a theatre production called Sponono, The production follows the story of a 35-year-old woman who is on a quest to find love, but has however not been fortunate enough to get that eternal love.
Join Musam Khalifi on Afro Showbiz every Saturday at 19:30 CAT.
Welcome to Business Review. What a week it has been. The rand has hit a 6.5-year low against the dollar. It's weakened to 11.88 to the dollar. It was trading above 11.70 in December, but it hasn't been at the levels we're seeing today since October 2008.
How do we ensure that we negotiate good contracts so that, money is not flown out of the country?
If we think the rand is low, the Nigerian currency hit 204 to the dollar today, an all-time low. From July this year, the Zimbabwean dollar will cease to exist.
One of the major serious problems is policy uncertainty in Zimbabwe, and the monetary policy can only be a victim of such an environment.
That's Business News, weekdays at 6 p.m. on SABC News.